Disclaimer: this AI-generated audiobook may have occasional mispronunciations, especially with Korean names, and might not fully capture emotions. It's a work of fan fiction, purely fictional, and not related to real people or events. Please enjoy it as a creative experience. Just sit back, relax, and immerse yourself in the story. Thank you for understanding, and I hope you enjoy the audiobook.
The room was dimly lit, with the warm glow of amber lamps casting long shadows on the walls. A soft melody floated through the air, almost at odds with the grim scene unfolding. The jacuzzi in the center of the room bubbled quietly, its water an unsettling red hue, dyed by the blood of the man who now lay lifeless within it. His chest has a fresh hole made by a bullet, his red blood staining his white shirt, spreading like ink on paper. And there, standing at the edge of the scene, holding a gun with steady hands, was Kim Taehyung. He looked eerily calm, his face a mask of indifference. His choice of outfit was a provocative, form-fitting, slutty outfit designed to distract and catch male attention, which remained clean as new, untouched by the chaos he had orchestrated. The sultry role he had played to slip in this room had served its purpose. This was no ordinary seduction. This was a mission. And now it was complete. Taehyung retrieved his phone from his pocket and pressed a button, his movements deliberate and precise. "Done, boss," he said, his voice steady, betraying no emotion. On the other end of the line, a voice replied, cold and commanding. "Good, bring back the pen drive." The call ended immediately, leaving no room for friendliness or concern. Taehyung exhaled, lowering the phone to his side, his tone laced with bitterness as he murmured to himself, not even a, "How are you?" or, "Are you okay?" A mocking laugh escaped from his mouth. He glanced at the weapon, still in his grasp, the weight of it suddenly feeling heavier. Sometimes he thought about ending it all. Holding the gun to his own head and pull the trigger, or stepping off the edge of a tall building seemed like a way to escape the pain in his heart. But he couldn't do it. Not because he was afraid to die, it was because the thought of never seeing the person he loved again was scarier than death itself. So he kept going, forcing himself to live even when it hurt. Taehyung shook off the dark thoughts and took a deep breath to steady himself. He had to focus. Quickly, he changed out of the seductive outfit and put on a sleek, all-black outfit that fit him perfectly. The disguise was gone. Now, he was ready to move like a predator in the shadows. He glanced at the lifeless man in the jacuzzi one last time, ensuring no trace of evidence had been left behind. The pen drive was secured in his pocket, the mission a success. Without using the door, he approached the window. Sliding it open, he stepped out onto the ledge. For someone like him, climbing down a 44-story building was a piece of cake. With a faint smirk, he began his dive, vanishing into the night like a ghost. The mission was over, but the weight of his choices lingered, haunting him in the silence. The elevator doors opened to the top floor of the luxurious high-rise owned by Taekook, the infamous Mafia boss of Seoul. As Taehyung stepped out, the strong mix of smoke and alcohol hit him like a wave. The floor was alive with the sound of laughter, clinking glasses, and the heavy bass of music. A haven for those who reveled in excess. Without betraying a single emotion, Taehyung walked through the crowd, his sharp eyes scanning the space for one person. In the center of the room, on a fancy red couch, sat Taekook, the Mafia king himself. Taehyung's jaw clenched at the sight. On either side of Taekook were two of his usual twinks, clinging to him, lighting his cigarettes and pouring his drinks. They shot smug looks at Taehyung, making his quiet anger burn even more. Taehyung moved with purpose, ignoring the weight of their mocking gazes. Taekook, despite being preoccupied with his so-called assistants/playthings Leo and Nick, two brothers who are the most close to Taekook. And these two twinks don't get along with Taehyung at all. Taekook noticed his approach almost instantly. His dark, piercing eyes met Taehyung's, wordlessly asking what he wanted. Taehyung pulled out a small pen drive and extended it. He said curtly, "Here." Their fingers brushed as Taekook took the drive, a fleeting touch that sent a jolt through Taehyung's chest. But he quickly suppressed it. He knew better that he shouldn't read too much into it because to Taekook, it meant nothing. Jungkook said, his tone dismissive. "Good job, go grab a drink at the bar." And just like that, Jungkook's attention returned to the men beside him. The two assistants smirked, their gazes dripping with derision, as if silently declaring, "He's ours, and you're nothing." Swallowing his humiliation, Taehyung turned and made his way to the bar. The bartender Jimin greeted him with a warm smile. "Rough night?" Jimin asked as Taehyung slid onto a stool. He gave Jimin a note and quickly muttered, his desperation evident. "Just give me something strong. Anything." Jimin raised a brow as he began preparing a drink. "I heard you successfully took out the target. Shouldn't this be a celebration?" "Not like he cares," Taehyung replied, his eyes drifting back to Jungkook. He sat there, now scrolling through his phone, completely unbothered. Jimin sighed, placing the glass in front of Taehyung. "It's been 2 years, Taehyung. When are you going to let this go?" Taehyung scoffed bitterly, downing the drink in one gulp. "You think I haven't tried?" "Falling for him was the worst fucking mistake I've ever made," he admitted, his voice tinged with anguish as his gaze lingered on Jungkook. Jimin's heart ached for his friend. "Seeing you like this, it scares me. Why don't you just confess to him?" Taehyung let out a hollow laugh. "Confess? So I can humiliate myself even more? He doesn't care, Jimin. He doesn't give a damn whether I'm hurt or alive, whether I come back from a mission in one piece or not. And yet here I am, clinging to the hope of just being near him. You think I should destroy what little dignity I have left by confessing? Hell no." The pain in his voice was palpable, and Jimin struggled to find the right words. "How long are you planning to carry this around, this pain?" Taehyung's lips curled into a bitter smile. "As long as I've got the drugs, I'll manage." Jimin froze. "Taehyung, you're still using. You know that stuff will kill you." "I wish it will," Taehyung said, setting the glass down with finality. "And maybe that's the only way I'll finally be free." Before Jimin could argue further, Taehyung stood up and walked away. "See ya," he said without looking back, leaving Jimin staring after him, helpless and heartbroken. As soon as Taehyung walked into his room, he threw himself onto the bed, burying his face in the pillow. He stayed like that for a few seconds, suffocating himself in the soft fabric, as if trying to disappear. He exhaled heavily, turning onto his back and staring at the ceiling. "I wish I had the courage to unalive myself," he muttered, sorrow thick in his voice. Just 2 years ago, his life was nothing more than singing at a bar, one filled with underworld criminals. They would try to touch him, humiliate him when he wasn't entertaining them enough. Some even wanted him to strip. So many disgusting things happened to him, but he had no choice. He had responsibilities. His younger brother needed money for school. No matter how broken Taehyung felt, he never let it affect his brother. His brother lived in a hostel, studying, unaware of the kind of life Taehyung endured. And Taehyung was willing to do anything to give him a better future because his brother was the only family he had left. One night, a gang fight broke out in the bar. Bullets rained down and Taehyung had no choice but to hide behind a table. That's when he saw Jungkook, the Mafia king of Seoul. Jungkook saved him that night, and in that moment, Taehyung lost his heart to him. He begged Jungkook to let him join his gang, and to his surprise, Jungkook agreed, but only if he could pass a test. That's when Taehyung realized his own potential. He was fast, a quick learner, a sharp thinker, and above all, fiercely loyal to Jungkook. His skills earned him a position as a spy and assassin for the gang. The money was good, but was that really why Taehyung joined? No, it wasn't just about the money. It was about Jungkook, the man he dared to love. A man who was far beyond his reach, and that love was killing him. Jungkook didn't want him. Why would he? Taehyung was just an ordinary guy, and Jungkook was completely out of his league. The pain of being unwanted made him want to die, but at the same time, the desperate need to see Jungkook, even for a single moment, kept him alive. And that was his curse, the reason his life felt unbearable. Shaking his head, Taehyung tried to push Jungkook's face out of his mind. He quickly pulled out a small packet of pills and took one. "Only you can save my life," he whispered, staring at the drugs. The pills made his mind go blank. He could still talk, move, and function, but his thoughts became empty. They helped him sleep, but they had side effects. Each time he took them, pieces of his memory faded. Not completely, but enough that he could no longer remember emotions or conversations. As long as his mind was free from Jungkook, he could survive. That was enough. Or at least, he told himself it was. An hour had passed, but Taehyung was still lying there, arms spread out, eyes fixed on the ceiling. His mind was completely blank, the drugs doing their job perfectly. No thoughts, no emotions, just emptiness. Then, the door creaked open. Taehyung's gaze shifted slightly. It was him, Jungkook. Of course it was Jungkook, just like every other night. Taehyung wasn't surprised, he never was. Jungkook always came to his room at this hour, and every night it was the same. Intimacy without meaning, touch without love. Taehyung didn't move. He didn't react. He had stopped expecting anything different. Jungkook entered the room without a word, shrugging off his blazer before climbing over Taehyung's body. His lips found Taehyung's neck, pressing soft, practiced kisses against his skin. Taehyung lay there like a lifeless doll, his eyes hollow. The sadness was still there, lurking beneath the surface, but it had no place in this moment. Because this wasn't love, this wasn't what he wanted. Yes, he wanted Jungkook. He wanted him with every aching part of his soul. But not like this. Not as a body to be used and discarded. Not as a meaningless distraction. No one knew about this. No one knew that the mighty Mafia king slipped into Taehyung's bed every night, took what he wanted and left before dawn. They never spoke about it. There were no promises, no tenderness, no feelings, just silence. And that silence was killing Taehyung. The room was dark, the only light slipping through the small gap in the window. But it wasn't enough, just like how the few hours of pleasure from his boss weren't enough to fill the emptiness inside Taehyung. He slowly opened his eyes. The drugs had worn off, and so had Jungkook's presence. Taehyung turned his head, staring at the empty space beside him. The same spot where Jungkook had laid just hours ago. Now, all that remained was cold sheets and the distant scent of him. Taehyung let out a hollow laugh before forcing himself out of bed. Another ordinary day. After a shower, he dressed in something comfortable, a simple t-shirt and trousers. Today wasn't a field day, no spying, no killing, just another day in the office. His closet was half filled with these casual clothes because, despite the life he lived, he still liked dressing in things that made him feel normal. Every week, a new set of clothes appeared in his room, but he never questioned where they came from. As he stepped out, the air in the building felt different. Tension hung heavy, whispers filled the halls, and people moved hurriedly. Something was wrong. Taehyung's instincts kicked in immediately, his body alert as he followed the chaos down the hallway. At the far end, he spotted Yoongi, the gang's top hacker. They weren't exactly close. Yoongi had always been a quiet, intimidating presence, but ever since he started dating Jimin, he and Taehyung had exchanged a few words here and there. Taehyung approached him. "What's going on, Hyung?" Yoongi barely glanced at him, his face as serious as ever. "Nick was kidnapped last night," he said before walking away without another word.
Taehyung blinked. Nick? Jungkook's first assistant? The same guy who always threw him nasty looks for being close to Jungkook? He was still processing the news when another man approached him. "Taehyung, boss wants to see you in the meeting room." Taehyung frowned, thinking about the reason, but he brushed off the question and just turned and headed toward the meeting room. The moment he stepped inside, he took in the atmosphere. Jungkook stood tense, phone pressed to his ear, his face unreadable. Leo was crying on the couch. Around them, men moved in a hurry, busy with their own tasks. As soon as Leo spotted Taehyung, he lunged. "You bitch! What did you do to my brother?" he screamed, grabbing Taehyung by the collar. Taehyung staggered slightly, caught off guard. "What the hell are you talking about?" he demanded. Leo's eyes burned with rage. "You hated Nick, didn't you? You kidnapped him last night." Taehyung barely reacted. This wasn't the first time Leo had accused him of something. Every time one of his beloved people faced trouble, Taehyung was the first to blame. Taehyung yanked Leo's hands off his collar, his expression hard. "Mind your tone," he said coldly. "I didn't do anything to him." Jungkook ended his call then and walked toward them. Leo turned to him instantly, his tears falling harder. "Baby, he did it. I know he's the one who kidnapped Nick." Leo sobbed, wrapping his arms around Jungkook. Taehyung rolled his eyes. Drama, that's all this was. I already told you I didn't do anything, Taehyung said, his gaze flickering to Jungkook, who remained silent. But then Leo stepped forward again, this time with fire in his eyes. Oh really? He sneered. Then where were you last night when Nick was taken? I saw it, Taehyung. It was you. You made him unconscious and drove away in a van. Taehyung stared at him in disbelief. Lies. Blatant, ridiculous lies. I was in my room all night, Taehyung said firmly, his eyes now searching Jungkook's face. Jungkook knew where he was. He was with him the entire night. Taehyung waited, hopeful. He expected Jungkook to say something, to brush off these accusations with a simple truth. But instead, Jungkook's next words shattered him. Did you do it? Taehyung froze. His heart cracked, a sharp pain slicing through his chest. Jungkook knew the answer, he knew the truth. And yet, he was still asking. Was he so ashamed to admit he was with Taehyung? Was it so humiliating that he'd rather pretend it never happened? Taehyung clenched his fists, his once hopeful eyes now darkening with anger. You think I did it? He asked quietly, voice laced with betrayal. Jungkook's expression didn't change. Did you do it or not? He asked again, his tone colder. Taehyung let out a breathless laugh, the bitterness in his heart growing. Do you doubt my loyalty, boss? He asked, his voice shaking with both hurt and rage. Jungkook didn't waver. Answer my question. Taehyung could barely process it. He was willing to die for Jungkook. He had given up everything for him. And yet, here he was, being questioned like a traitor. Taehyung's nails dug into his palms. His entire world tilted. He had bled for Jungkook, killed for him, loved him in ways no one else ever could. And yet, here he was, being treated like a traitor. Before he could respond, a man stepped forward, bowing slightly before handing Jungkook a tablet. Boss, here's the CCTV footage. The room stilled. The video began to play, revealing a black van, one that was disturbingly familiar. Taehyung's stomach twisted. The van has a logo of their greatest enemy, Robert, the man who controlled the Southern Territory and had long been vying for Jungkook's downfall. They watched as the van idled under the dim glow of the streetlights. A man in a black suit emerged from the shadows, carrying an unconscious Nick toward the vehicle. Taehyung's stomach dropped, because the man on screen, he was dressed exactly like Taehyung's same suit, same mask, same insignia, and the final detail that made his blood run ice cold, a pink heart, a tiny, barely noticeable mark stitched onto the sleeve, a mark only Taehyung had. Leo's laughter was shrill, hysterical. See? It's him. He's working for Robert. He's a traitor. Taehyung's breath hitched. No, he whispered, eyes widening in horror. This wasn't real. This wasn't happening. Boss. He turned to Jungkook desperately. This isn't me. I didn't do anything. Someone's framing me. He searched Jungkook's face, pleading. Jungkook knew the truth. He had to. But then, without a single word, Jungkook lifted his hand and gestured, a simple signal. A command. The next second, 3 bodyguards grabbed Taehyung, wrenching his arms behind his back. Wait, no, wait! Panic flooded his veins. He struggled, muscles straining against the unrelenting grip of the guards. Jungkook's back was already turned, walking away. Boss! Taehyung screamed, voice cracking. Please, I would never betray you. Jungkook didn't stop, didn't even look back. No, no, please! Taehyung thrashed violently, but the men only tightened their grip. Jungkook, you know me! You know I'm not a traitor. You know I would rather die than betray you. His voice broke, desperation choking him, his vision blurred with tears. Still, Jungkook kept walking, kept moving forward as if Taehyung's screams meant nothing. Terror clawed at Taehyung's throat. No, this wasn't real. Jungkook wouldn't do this to him. He couldn't. But the last thing Taehyung saw before the doors slammed shut was Jungkook's back, and then, nothing. The guards threw Taehyung into the basement lockup, an unforgiving place meant for torturing traitors and enemies until they broke. The moment he hit the cold, filthy floor, a wave of nausea rolled over him. The air was thick with the stench of blood and decay. Dark stains coated the stone walls, remnants of past victims who had met their end here. Taehyung hated this place. He heard the heavy clang of the cell door locking, followed by the retreating footsteps of the guards. They didn't say a word. They didn't need to. He knew how this worked. First, they would leave him here. No food, no water. Let him starve for 2 days. Then they'd come. Ask him to talk. Demand answers. If he refused, they'd torture him. If he still held out, they'd make it worse. Worse than he could imagine. Until he begged for death. And if he still didn't break, they'd kill him. That was the process. Taehyung knew it well. But that wasn't what consumed his mind right now. The physical pain didn't scare him. The thought of being tortured didn't make his heart race. No. His heart was already shattered beyond recognition. Jungkook had done this. Jungkook, the man who saved him. The man he would have died for. His breath came in short gasps, his pulse erratic as flashes of the past burned behind his eyes. Jungkook's hand reaching for him in the dark. Jungkook pulling him from death. Jungkook keeping him alive. Why? The scream tore from his throat before he could stop it. Why did you save me that day? Why? 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 His knees buckled. He collapsed onto the filthy ground, hands gripping his chest like he could physically hold his breaking heart together. Tears burned down his cheeks, hot and endless. His entire body trembled as he buried his face in his hands. Then, a sharp smack. He slapped himself. Once, twice, 3 times, 4. The sound echoed in the empty basement, mixing with the ragged sobs spilling from his lips. How could he have been so stupid? How could he have ever thought Jungkook cared about him? He let out a choked, bitter laugh between his tears. You should have let me die that day. His voice cracked, shaking with devastation. How could he have hoped, even for a second, that Jungkook would believe him? How could he have been so delusional to think that the Mafia king, Jeon Jungkook, would have faith in his loyalty? His breathing turned erratic, shallow gasps filling the suffocating space. His chest felt like it was caving in, the pain so unbearable it was choking him. He couldn't take it. He needed it to stop. Desperation took over as his trembling fingers dug into his pocket. His heart pounded when he found it. A single pill, his salvation. With shaky hands, he popped it into his mouth, swallowing it dry. It wouldn't make the pain go away. Not forever. But for a little while, at least, his mind could be silent. The drug hit fast. Too fast. His limbs felt like lead, his breathing slowing, his mind turning hazy. Something was wrong. His vision blurred, the dim light of the basement flickering in and out. His head lolled to the side, his body no longer his own. A deep, creeping dizziness spread through him, different from before. His stomach clenched, his pulse sluggish. That's when it hit him. He had taken a pill just hours ago. And now, another one. It was too much. He overdosed himself, his body was shutting down. Then, the heavy door creaked open. Footsteps. Someone was here. Taehyung tried to focus, blinking sluggishly. But his vision was spinning, his body sinking. His lips parted weakly, trying to ask who. But before he could get the words out, everything faded to black.